What would you do if a stray dog led you into the woods only to uncover a secret that would take down a criminal empire and restore your faith in humanity? The snow had fallen hard the night before, blanketing the outskirts of Red Hollow, Montana, in a cold silence that felt almost sacred. Everything, the railroad tracks, the abandoned lumber yard, the broken fences, was buried beneath a thick crust of white. The wind wasn't howling, it was still, watching, waiting. At the very edge of town, where no one walked anymore, and where the woods began creeping in to reclaim forgotten buildings, stood an old brick warehouse. 3 stories tall, its red facade was chipped and weather-worn, its windows either shattered or boarded over with curling plywood. Rusted signs warned of trespassers, though no one had bothered to heed them in years. And yet, this morning, someone, or rather, something did. A lone German shepherd padded through the fresh snow. His coat, once thick and proud, was now mottled with mud and frost. His ribs showed beneath the thinning fur, and a slight limp slowed his gait. His right ear bore a small triangular notch, an old scar from a life that once had purpose. No one had called his name in over a year, but if you had, he might have remembered it. Shadow. Once, Shadow had been a decorated search and rescue canine. He had been trained to find the lost, the trapped, the broken. His nose had saved lives. His instincts had been trusted more than maps. But that was before the fire, before Officer Sarah Grady. His handler, his partner, his home died in an apartment blaze while trying to save a trapped family. Shadow had tried to pull her out, his paws bled from clawing at burning debris, but in the end, the fire took her, and something inside him died too. Afterward, he wouldn't eat, wouldn't respond. One night, he simply vanished, slipping through the back fence of the department's canine unit. No collar, no goodbyes, just gone. Since then, Shadow had lived on the edge of the wilderness, surviving on scraps, instinct, and memories. Most days, he was just another shadow flickering behind garbage bins or slipping between trees at dusk, forgotten, untamed. But this morning, something stirred. A sound. Faint, weak, a whimper. Not from an animal, not the squeak of a rabbit or the bark of a fox. This was human. Low, fragile. The sound of someone trying to stay alive. Shadow stopped mid-step, one paw lifted in the air. His ears perked, nose twitching. Again there it was. A muffled cry beneath the snow-covered ground, laced with pain and fear. It came from the warehouse. He turned toward the building. No hesitation, only focus. Moving silently through the snow, Shadow approached the side of the structure. His breath clouded the cold air as he sniffed along the foundation. Then he found it a cracked basement window, half buried in drift. He pressed his snout to the glass, fogging it. Inside, under a flickering bulb that swung on a frayed wire, was a man, tied to a chair, blindfolded. Blood streaked down his face. His wrists were bound, raw from struggle. His uniform, shirt torn and stained, still bore the faint symbol of the Red Hollow Sheriff's Department. His name tag was gone, but Shadow didn't need it. His nose told him everything. Ethan Cole. Deputy, 30 years old, a good man. A familiar scent. Shadow had seen his face on flyers stuck to street lamps and gas pumps all week. The words didn't matter. The scent did. It was pain. Yes, but also purpose. This man didn't belong in that basement. He was someone worth saving. Cole stirred slightly, head sagging, lips dry. A whisper escaped. "Help, please," Shadow growled, low and steady, not out of threat, but instinct. A sound to let the man know, you are not alone. Inside, Cole froze. His ears picked up the faint noise, something breathing, something alive. "Who's there?" he rasped. "Please." Shadow pawed at the glass, but it wouldn't budge. The wall was too thick, the window sealed shut. Still, he didn't leave. Not yet. He memorized everything, the scent, the layout, the sounds. Then, with one last glance through the frosted pane, he turned and disappeared into the storm. Inside, Cole heard the retreating scratch of paws. Someone or something had heard him. That spark was enough. He sat up straighter, held his breath, prayed. And just in time, footsteps echoed above. Someone was coming back. Meanwhile, across town, the sun peeked over the hills, spilling pale light onto a small veterinary clinic tucked between a feed store and an old gas station. The chipped sign read, Red Hollow Animal Care, Dr. Ava Morgan. Inside, Ava late 20s, red curls tucked under a wool hat, was already moving. She had inherited the clinic after her father passed and had since become a quiet guardian of the strays nobody else wanted. That morning, she stepped out back with a bowl of kibble and a thermos cap full of warm water. "Come on, soldier," she called gently. "You've earned breakfast." Out of the trees came Shadow. He limped forward, eyes sharp but wary. Ava crouched slowly. "You look like hell," she murmured. Shadow didn't eat. Instead, he dropped something at her feet, a torn, muddy boot. Ava blinked. It bore a bloodstain and a symbol, a silver star over a pine tree. Her heart skipped. It was a Red Hollow police-issued duty boot, and someone had bled in it. Shadow backed away, watched her, then turned and vanished. Ava stood frozen for several seconds, heart hammering. Then she reached for her phone. "Doctor!" Ava Morgan stood completely still. The bowl of kibble sat forgotten at her feet. The cold wind bit through her coat, but she didn't feel it. Her eyes were locked on the object the dog had left behind, a mud-caked, blood-stained boot, unmistakably official. She bent down slowly, her fingers trembling slightly as she picked it up. The leather was cracked and soaked. The tread was standard issue, and near the collar, just faintly beneath the grime, she spotted a faded patch embroidered with a silver star over a pine tree, the symbol of the Red Hollow Sheriff's Department. And worse, there was blood. Dark. Dried. Not old. Her heart thudded. She looked up toward the direction the dog had vanished. The falling snow had already begun covering his tracks. Shadow was gone again, but his message was clear. Someone needed help, and he couldn't do it alone. Ava turned and rushed inside. The bell above the clinic door jingled as she entered. Inside, the fluorescent light overhead buzzed faintly, flickering with the kind of irregular rhythm that usually drove her crazy, but she didn't notice it now. She set the boot gently on a blue towel beside her keyboard, cleaned it just enough to see the details. She opened her laptop and pulled up the local news page. The screen buffered, then loaded. There he was, Deputy Ethan Cole. Age 30, last seen on patrol 3 nights ago. Radio contact lost near the north quadrant of town. No confirmed struggle. No body, no vehicle, just vanished. Ava stared at the screen. She wasn't close to Cole, but she'd seen him over the years. At town parades, at school events. He was the kind of man who bent down to talk to kids at eye level. The kind who always brought in lost pets Evan after hours. She remembered one moment vividly now, years ago, outside her clinic. A German shepherd, younger and stronger then, had shown up limping. Cole had crouched beside the dog and offered a granola bar, murmuring something soft. It had been Shadow. And now, years later, that same dog had brought her Cole's boot. She didn't hesitate. Ava picked up the phone and dialed. The line clicked. "Red Hollow Police Department, this is dispatch." "This is Dr. Ava Morgan," she said quickly. "At the vet clinic, I think I have something. I think it belongs to Deputy Cole." There was a pause on the line. "You sure it's not from one of the patrol officers?" "No, she said firmly. There's blood on it, and a dog brought it to me. Another pause. A dog? A German shepherd, no collar, scar on his ear. He limps a little, but he wasn't just wandering, he came right to me. Silence. Then finally, stay where you are. We're sending someone. 20 minutes later, the clinic door opened with a gust of snow and the sound of heavy boots. Captain Daniel Reeves stepped inside, shaking ice from his long coat. His white beard was dusted with frost, and his face looked like it hadn't rested in days. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on Ava and the boot resting on the counter. You said a dog brought this? He asked. Ava nodded. Male German shepherd, looked malnourished, scarred, but focused, like he had a mission. Reeve grunted and turned the boot over in his gloved hands. This is Cole's size. His name's still inside the lining. He looked up. Where did the dog go? Ava pointed through the back window, toward the alley and the forest line beyond. He went north, toward the old lumberyard. Reeves' expression darkened. That place hasn't seen a soul since the mill closed 12 years ago. Locals call it dead ground. He paused. Still, if the dog came to you, maybe he wants us to follow. Ava didn't answer. She didn't need to. That afternoon, a meeting was called at the Red Hollow Sheriff's Department. Inside the cramped briefing room, the energy was tight and grim. Lieutenant Grace Nolan stood near a wall map, a red marker in hand. She was precise, always composed, and the kind of officer who made people listen when she spoke. She jabbed her finger at a shaded square on the northern edge. This is the warehouse compound. 3 buildings, all condemned. 0 foot traffic, no surveillance, no heat mapping. Across from her, Tech Officer Liam Tran flipped through forensic photos. If someone wanted to keep someone hidden, that's where I'd do it, Grace added. Captain Reeve entered the room holding up a sealed evidence bag. This boot was brought in this morning, covered in blood, brought by a stray. It belongs to Cole. He let the words settle. Liam blinked. A stray dog. More than a stray, Reeve said. We pulled records from the K9 unit. German shepherd, scar on the ear. Matches the description of a dog that went missing 2 years ago. Grace looked up. Shadow? Reeve nodded. Assigned to Officer Sarah Grady. Went missing after her funeral. Liam exhaled slowly. And now he's back, bringing evidence. Grace crossed her arms. Then we move, quietly, no alerts. No leaks. We prep a search team for dawn. That's our window before the next storm front. Reeve gave one firm nod. Let's bring our deputy home. That night, Ava stood behind the clinic again. She left out another dish this time, warm stew and a wool glove soaked with lavender oil. Where are you, boy? She whispered. Snow drifted through the air in soft flakes. Then, just beyond the fence, 2 amber eyes blinked in the darkness, then vanished. Ava smiled, barely. She didn't say anything more. The message had been received. Meanwhile, in the freezing belly of the warehouse, Ethan Cole stirred. The air was thick with mildew and the smell of oil. His limbs ached. His wrists bled, every breath hurt, but his ears picked up something soft. A scratch, a whimper, then a low, steady growl familiar, almost comforting. You came back, he whispered, voice cracking. You really came back. The storm outside grew heavier as the sun slipped behind the mountains of Red Hollow. The old warehouse, forgotten and half-sunken into snow, stood like a grave marker for everything the town had let rot and slip away. Inside, Deputy Ethan Cole sat slumped in the same wooden chair he'd been tied to for days. His body screamed in quiet pain. Rope burns circled his wrists like firebrands. His legs had gone numb hours ago. His lips were dry, cracked, and his eyes, still blindfolded, only saw shadows behind his eyelids. Then came the sound, soft, delicate. A familiar scratching near the base of the wall. then the warm breath of something alive, something close. Cole stirred, heart thudding against his ribs. "Is someone there?" he croaked. A pause. Then it came again, the feeling of warm fur brushing his knee. And then astonishingly a wet tongue, carefully, deliberately licking at the ropes binding his wrist. He froze, not out of fear but out of disbelief. "Hey, dog," he whispered. The tongue returned, slow and sure, as if testing the knot. Cole's breath caught. This wasn't wild. This wasn't random. This was trained. He held still, heart hammering, trying not to startle whatever creature was helping him. He could feel the weight shift, the quiet scrape of paws repositioning. Then, carefully, soft teeth tugged at the knot across his eyes. The cloth shifted, slipped, and then light. Not much, just the dim flicker from the hanging bulb overhead, but after endless hours of darkness, it might as well have been sunrise. Cole blinked hard. Everything swam, blurred, then began to clear, and there he was. A German shepherd, lean, ragged, but unmistakably focused. His black and tan coat was matted with mud and snow. His body showed the hard lines of hunger and exposure, but his eyes were sharp, deep amber, intelligent. A quiet storm behind them. "You," Cole whispered. The dog tilted his head. "You came back." The shepherd stepped forward, sniffed the ropes around Cole's ankles, then sat beside him like a soldier on duty, still, alert. Guarding. Cole swallowed the lump in his throat. "Where did you come from, boy?" No answer. Only silence and the sound of wind pressing against the old metal door. Back at the Red Hollow Police Department, Tech Officer Liam Tran tapped furiously at his keyboard. On screen was a paused video frame from a nearby traffic cam. Lieutenant Grace Nolan leaned over his shoulder. "There," she pointed. "Rewind 5 seconds." Liam tapped back. The grainy footage showed a German shepherd crossing County Road 12. "He's carrying something," Liam murmured. He zoomed in. In the dog's mouth dangled a boot-dark leather, dried blood along the ankle. Grace narrowed her eyes. "That's Cole's boot." Liam checked the timestamp, 4:47 a.m. yesterday. Roughly 90 minutes before Dr. Morgan reported the drop. Grace looked up as Captain Daniel Reeve entered the tech room, snow still clinging to his coat. "What are we looking at?" he asked. Grace gestured. "The same dog. He found Cole first." "He's not just scavenging, he's leading us." Reeve watched the screen in silence, then turned to Liam. "Get me everything we have on that dog." "Prior service records, K9 units, start with rescues." Liam nodded. "Already did. There's a match." He pulled up a digital file. "Shadow, 7 years old, former search and rescue K9, trained under Officer Sarah Grady." Grace glanced over. "The one who died in that apartment fire?" "Yeah," Liam said softly. "He disappeared after her funeral. Never seen again until now." Reeve crossed his arms. "Then he didn't just survive. He remembered. Back at the warehouse, Cole tried to shift, testing the ropes. They were too tight for him to break, but the dog had loosened the blindfold. That was something. He turned slightly toward the shepherd. "You trained for this, didn't you?" he murmured. The dog gave a single blink. "Search and rescue?" The shepherd rose, circled once, then laid down in front of him, chin on paws, eyes fixed on the door. A quiet sentinel. Cole leaned his head back against the wall and closed his eyes. "God, I thought I was going to die in here." The dog didn't move. But he didn't leave either. Cole let out a shuddering breath. "Guess we're in this together now, huh?" Meanwhile, back at Dr. Ava Morgan's clinic, the doorbell chimed softly. She looked up from her laptop. Her fingers were still stained from cleaning the boot, her desk littered with maps and photos of the northern logging yard. The visitor was unexpected Lieutenant Grace Nolan, still in uniform. "I brought this," Ava said, handing her a folder. Inside were old vet records, microchip data, and photos. "I treated a dog years ago, black and tan shepherd, scar on the right ear. Minor hip imbalance. His name was Shadow." Grace flipped through the documents. "We matched him on canine records this morning. He was Sarah Grady's dog." "I remember her," Ava said quietly. "She brought him in after a wildfire. Said he pulled a kid from a collapsed shed." "He was surgical." Grace's voice softened. "She died saving others too." "And he disappeared the day of her funeral," Ava added. "Everyone thought he ran off." Grace nodded slowly. "He didn't run. He was waiting." At that moment, Liam's voice came through on Grace's radio. "We've got movement near the lumberyard." Drone picked up thermal signatures. One small, one large, moving together. Dog and a person. Possibly underground. Grace's hand tightened around the file. She looked at Ava. "Your dog might have just led us to Cole." Back in the warehouse, footsteps echoed from above. Shadow stiffened, rising into a low crouch. Cole's pulse quickened. "What is it?" he whispered. The shepherd growled low. Boots thudded on floorboards above, then paused. Shadow didn't move, didn't bark. He was listening. And waiting. Just like he used to. The concrete floor beneath Ethan Cole's boots was cold enough to burn. His fingers twitched weakly against the rope binding his wrists, raw from struggling. He didn't know how long he'd been down here, 3 days, maybe 4, but the blur of time was nothing compared to the suffocating dark. Now, at least, he could see. Thanks to the dog. The shepherd lay close by, motionless except for the steady rise and fall of his chest. But every few seconds, his ears would twitch, picking up sounds Cole couldn't hear. Then it changed. Shadow rose slowly, his muscles coiled tight. Cole didn't have to ask. Someone was coming. The shepherd slinked toward the stairwell, paws silent, body low. His tail froze in a stiff line behind him. His head turned toward the door above, his eyes narrowing into something that was neither fear nor curiosity. It was purpose. Cole's voice barely rose above a whisper. "You should go. He can't see you. Not yet. Get out of here." But Shadow didn't move. Footsteps descended, one at a time, measured. Heavy. A sound like metal scraping against metal followed, then the soft creak of the basement door being unlatched, but not opened. Whoever was outside paused. Waiting, then retreated. Silence again. Cole let out the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Shadow returned to his side, nudging the man's knee with his nose. "I don't know what he wants," Cole murmured, "but I think he's losing it." The dog didn't respond. He just settled beside Cole again, eyes fixed on the shadows ahead. At that same hour, miles across town, Dr. Ava Morgan stood in her clinic doorway, bundled in a plaid coat, watching the forest. She'd left out stew and water, along with a glove soaked in lavender oil, something familiar. Snowflakes danced around her boots, the night quiet except for the soft rustle of wind through pine. Then she saw it. A paw print. Fresh, and beside it a small smear of blood. Her chest tightened. "He's hurt," she whispered, turning and heading back inside. She didn't know how far he had gone, but she knew he wasn't giving up. Neither would she. Back at the Red Hollow Police Department, inside the operations room, a map of the old lumberyard covered the wall. Captain Daniel Reeves' weathered hand hovered over the blueprint as he spoke. "This compound has 4 main structures," he said. One of them partially collapsed back in '09, basement still intact, barely. He tapped the farthest corner of the lot. "If Shadow keeps circling that spot, that's our entry." Lieutenant Grace Nolan pointed at a red circle drawn near the old loading dock. "We deploy here. No sirens, no radios unless necessary." "We want Cole alive," Reeve nodded. "Let's move before the snowstorm does." Behind them, Deputy Ben Carter stepped in, his red beard frosted from the wind. "Teams are assembled," he said. "Drone eyes are live. 2 K9s and thermal scope kits loaded." Reeves slipped on his gloves. "Let's go get our man." Meanwhile, in the cold bowels of the warehouse, Shadow let out a low whiner sound between warning and anxiety. The dog rose again, pacing slowly to the far wall, nose working furiously. Cole leaned his head back against the damp wall, voice barely audible. "You're not just any stray, are you?" Shadow glanced back at him. Cole smiled weakly. "You picked me." The shepherd stepped closer, gently licked Cole's raw wrist just once, just enough to say, "Hold on." Wind screamed outside as the police convoy crept toward the compound. A grey wall of snow rolled over the tree line like a ghost army. But inside the SUVs, the mood was focused. Sharp. In the lead vehicle, Grace sat beside Reeve, reviewing the drone's latest feed. "Movement in the basement again," came Tech Officer Liam Tran's voice over the radio. "Larger thermal reading just entered, likely adult male." Reeve nodded once. "That's him." Ben Carter's voice followed from the rear unit. "Found a trail boot prints and paw prints together." "Coming from the slope by the old ramp." Reeve keyed his mic. "Team Alpha, hold positions. We go on my mark." "No gunfire unless fired upon," Grace responded with steel in her voice. "Copy that." Inside the basement, Frank Delaney, mid-50s, heavy-set, eyes sunken deep under a fraying brow, finally stepped through the door. He carried a metal tray with something that barely passed as food. His jeans were stained with oil, his flannel shirt ripped at the cuffs. A long scar ran down the side of his jaw. He stared at Cole with quiet hatred. "You sleeping?" he muttered, setting the tray down with a thud. Cole didn't answer. "You should be thankful," Frank went on. "You were always smiling in that uniform, thought you were better than people like me." He stepped closer, sneering. "Now look who's blind." "Tied, forgotten." He circled the room slowly, muttering to himself. Shadow didn't move. Didn't growl. He waited, watched. Calculated. Outside, the drone's thermal sensor picked up new movement. "Large body heat just entered the basement," Liam said into the comms. Standing near the chair, another signature's mauler lower to the ground, holding position. Grace leaned into the feed. "That's Shadow." She looked at Reeve. "We're going in." Back inside, Frank stepped toward Cole again. "Know why you're here?" he hissed. "Because you enforce their rules, not justice, not truth." In the corner, Shadow began to shift. Every line of his body was focused, tight. Then Frank reached for the box cutter on his belt. That's when Shadow moved, silently, precisely. He lunged, not for the throat, but for the wrist. The two collided in a burst of motion. Frank screamed, falling hard, the blade clattering across the floor. Cole flinched. Then boom. The door burst open. Flashlights. Boots. Voices. "Freeze! Hands where we can see them!" It was Grace. Ben rushed forward, kneeling beside Cole and cutting the ropes. "We got you, Deputy." "You're safe now." Cole blinked hard, light blinding him again. Then he turned his head. Shadow stood above Frank, still, calm, eyes locked on the fallen man. Captain Reeves stepped in, took one look, and whispered, "Good boy." The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and artificial quiet. Monitors beeped steadily beside Ethan Cole's bed. His wrist was bandaged, an IV line taped to the crook of his arm. He shifted slightly beneath the blanket, ribs sore from bruises and restraint. But none of that hurt as much as the silence. The silence that came after Shadow disappeared. Cole stared at the ceiling. He remembered the blur being cut loose, the bright lights, the noise of radios and boots. He remembered Sergeant Grace Nolan's voice, steady and firm. And then just for a moment he remembered Shadow looking back at him, then gone. No leash, no hesitation. Just gone into the snow. A soft knock broke his thoughts. The door creaked open, and Captain Daniel Reeves stepped in, snow still clinging to the folds of his coat. Beside him, Grace followed, posture straight, but her face worn from sleepless nights. "Morning, Deputy," Reeves said, pulling up a chair. Cole shifted upright. "I feel like I went 12 rounds with a snowplow." Grace smiled faintly. "Means you're still yourself." Cole looked at her. "Frank Delaney?" "In custody," she said. "He's not talking much, but we're piecing it together." Cole exhaled slowly. "He said someone bought me, traded for someone, that it wasn't just him." Grace's expression darkened. "He mentioned a man in a white van. Promised him a child, a replacement for someone named Jessica. Jessica was his daughter," Reeve added. "Died 3 years ago in a crash. Wife too. He never came back from it." "He's not the mastermind," Grace said. "If he handed you over, we're dealing with something bigger." Cole swallowed hard. "And the dog?" Reeve exchanged a glance with Grace. "Gone," she said. "Officers saw him bolting into the woods just after you were freed." Before we could catch him, Cole's eyes drifted down to his lap. "He was trained, more than trained. He knew when to move, how to flank. He waited for commands I couldn't even give." Reeve nodded. "Fits what we've learned." Grace stepped forward and placed a thin folder on the nightstand. "Dr. Ava Morgan, she brought this in. Medical records, microchip data. It's him." Cole opened the folder with one hand, flipping through. "Shadow," he read softly. "Assigned to Officer Sarah Grady," Reeve said. "Disappeared the day of her funeral. No one's seen him in 2 years." Cole stared at the name for a long time. "He didn't just survive," he murmured. "He remembered who he was." Across town, the windows of Ava Morgan's small cabin fogged with the warmth of boiling tea. She knelt beside a blood-stained fleece pad in front of the fireplace, gently scrubbing it clean with a cloth. Shadow had lain there. 2 nights before the rescue. 2 nights before everything changed. She wasn't the crying kind, not really. But she moved slowly, like every wipe across the fabric was a farewell. From the hallway, a voice called out, "You okay?" Ben Carter stepped into the room, holding 2 mugs of tea. He was in his usual stained overalls, hair still messy from working on trucks. Ava took the mug with a soft nod. "I'm fine. Just thinking about him." Ben sat beside her, stretching his legs out across the worn carpet. "He saved a man's life," he said. "Not bad for a ghost." Ava smiled, tired. "He's not just a dog, Ben. His name was Shadow. He was trained, loyal, broken, and he still came back." Ben sipped his tea. "Where do you think he is now?" She looked toward the woods through the frosted window. "Out there, watching. Healing. Waiting for someone to come find him." At the Red Hollow station, the interview room was cold and bare. Frank Delaney sat in a grey t-shirt, his hands flat on the metal table, eyes vacant. Across from him, Grace Nolan stared with her arms crossed. "You said someone brought Deputy Cole to you," she said. "Who was he?" Frank blinked slowly. "You said he promised you something," she added. "Was it the man in the white van?" His voice was barely a whisper. "He said he could fix it." "Give me another Jessica. Said the ones nobody missed were the best, like strays." Grace's face tightened. "What does that mean?" Frank looked up for the first time, a broken smile on his lips. "They're just strays. If they don't bark, nobody hears." Outside the room, Reeve turned from the observation window. "Get a photo lineup," he said to Liam Tran. "Every missing kid, every unsolved abduction in the last 5 years. This is bigger than we thought." That night, under the pines beyond Red Hollow, a shape moved in the dark. Shadow. His gait was slow, favoring his paw. But he kept going uphill, past frozen brush, toward a ridge that overlooked the quiet town below. He lay down on a flat rock, watched the lights flicker in the valley, and closed his eyes. For now, his mission was done, but he would not be forgotten. The sun crested over Red Hollow with a pale, wintry glow, lighting the frost-covered roofs and the tips of the pine trees like silver. Inside the sheriff's operations room, a quiet urgency hummed through the air. Files were spread open. Whiteboards were crowded with names, blurry photos, maps crisscrossed with red lines. Captain Daniel Reeves stood at the center of it all, eyes scanning the grid of leads now falling into place. "Frank Delaney didn't act alone," he said grimly. Lieutenant Grace Nolan tapped a new dot on the projector screen. "We traced the burner phone Delaney received instructions from. Signal pings show activity near an abandoned scout camp west of the highway, decommissioned for years. Easy to hide vehicles, even people." Beside her, FBI agent Mike Hanlier, clean-cut man with cold blue eyes, nodded. He'd arrived the night before, and already he spoke like he'd been here a month. "Same pattern as 2 other unsolved abduction cases in Oregon," he said. "Victims marked as invisible runaways, the homeless, people who wouldn't be missed, just like Delaney said." Grace's jaw clenched. "Like strays." Reeves' voice dropped. "And the van?" "Confirmed sighting near the Cold Pine Scout Camp," Hanley replied. "Same make and model. Parked at the tree line 3 nights ago." "Do we have cause for surveillance?" Grace asked. Hanley didn't hesitate. "Already underway." Across town, Dr. Ava Morgan crouched near the edge of the woods behind her clinic. She wore a thick coat, gloves too big for her fingers, and boots dusted with snow. Beside her, Ben Carter carried a sealed tin container and a roll of red cloth strips. "You really think he'll come back?" he asked. "I don't think," Ava said, tying a strip of cloth to a low branch. "I believe." The fabric fluttered in the wind, soaked in lavender oil and wrapped around tiny swatches of Ethan Cole's torn uniform. A scent trail. One only Shadow could follow. Ben raised an eyebrow. "This is more than just feeding a stray." "He's not a stray," Ava whispered. "He's a soldier, and he's still working." They moved silently, marking the trail from the tree line back toward the edge of town. It was the same path Shadow had taken before, the one that led him to her, and ultimately to Cole. Ava had studied that trail every night since, and today she rebuilt it with care and intention. Memory, after all, was scent, was pattern, was familiarity. And Shadow remembered. If he was still alive, he would come back the same way he left. At the final bend near the fence, Ben paused. "Wait," he said, lifting his hand. Ava turned. There, standing between 2 evergreens, was a shape. Fur muddied, body lean, ribs faintly visible under the coat. Amber eyes locked on hers. Shadow. Her breath caught in her throat. She didn't speak, didn't move. She simply dropped to a knee and whispered, "Shadow." He didn't run. He took one slow step forward, then another, and then he was running. Straight into her arms. That afternoon, back at the Red Hollow Sheriff's office, the mood had shifted. Hope had returned, and with it, a witness like no other. Shadow lay on a fleece blanket in the corner of the operations room, not chained, not restrained. His eyes moved carefully, taking in every face. Alert. Present. Waiting. Ava sat beside him, her hand resting gently on his back. Across the table, Grace, Reeve, Agent Hanley, and Tech Officer Liam Tran reviewed files and data. Liam pushed forward a digital microchip scan. "Confirmed," he said. K9 RG-17, call sign, Shadow. Registered under Officer Sarah Grady. Declared MIA 2 years ago. Grace looked toward the dog. He never forgot who he was. Hanley nodded. Dogs like this don't revert. They either break or keep going. Reeve leaned back, voice steady. He didn't just keep going, he brought one of ours home. Ava spoke up softly. I'm asking to keep him for now. At least until you decide what happens next. Reeve nodded. Done, but I want him close. He's not just a witness. He may be our best lead. Outside, the wind picked up again, but for the first time in days, Red Hollow didn't feel so cold. Shadow was back, and he wasn't finished yet. The air was thick with snow and silence. The old pine forest that bordered Cold Pine Scout Camp looked like something from a postcard. White branches, frozen trails, icicles hanging from skeletal cabins long abandoned. But beneath that stillness, something darker stirred. A white van sat parked near a collapsed structure, its rear doors shut, no lights, no noise. But heat sensors said otherwise. Inside an unmarked SUV on the ridge above, Captain Daniel Reeve stared at the handheld tablet. The drone feed showed two figures moving. One tall, one smaller, both unaware they were being watched. Reeve's voice cut through the comms. Coordinates locked. We move in 2 hours. The team nodded, silent. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about taking back what darkness tried to bury. Back in town, Deputy Ethan Cole stood on the porch of Dr. Ava Morgan's clinic. He was still recovering, his left side stiff, but there was strength returning to his steps. A fleece-lined jacket covered the bruises beneath his shirt. Inside, Shadow waited. Ava opened the door before he could knock. He's in the back, she said, voice low. Cole stepped in, boots brushing against the rug as he passed through the familiar warmth. The scent of herbal tea and antiseptic still lingered in the air. Near the fireplace, Shadow lay curled on a blanket. But the moment Cole entered the room, Shadow stirred. His ears lifted, his eyes met Cole's. And then he stood. No hesitation. He padded forward, slow but purposeful, and pressed his head gently against Cole's chest. Cole knelt, ignoring the ache in his ribs. Hey, he whispered, voice catching. Shadow didn't move, didn't bark. He just stayed there anchored, solid, home. Ava watched from the hallway, her eyes warm. He remembers. Cole looked up. So do I. An hour later, back at the sheriff's office, the final briefing began. FBI agent Mike Hanley tapped the map, his voice steady and focused. The suspects will expect law enforcement. What they don't expect is a tracker they can't outsmart. He looked at the dog seated beside Cole. Shadow wore his vest again, this time freshly cleaned, the K9 insignia reattached. His amber eyes scanned the room, not out of fear, but awareness. This is his terrain, Cole added. And if he's willing, I'll walk with him. Reeve exchanged a glance with Grace Nolan. Then he nodded. Approved. The convoy moved just before dusk. 3 vehicles, 1 drone, 1 dog. No sirens, no second chances. The road to Cold Pines was narrow and unforgiving. Snow muffled the tires. The forest grew darker with every mile. In the lead vehicle, Shadow sat beside Cole, eyes fixed on the windshield. Then, just 2 miles from the target, his head lifted, his ears twitched. Cole glanced at him. You smell it, don't you? Shadow barked once, sharp, deliberate. The convoy halted. From there, the team moved on foot, navigating through the trees in tactical silence. Wind howled across the ridge. The camp was just ahead, its silhouette broken and twisted. Suddenly, Shadow veered off the trail. Cole followed. They circled wide, away from the main path, and came up behind the white van. Shadow stopped. His body froze. Then he barked once more. Cole turned to Hanley. That's not an alert. It's a warning. Hanley didn't hesitate. Team Alpha, go. The takedown was swift. The taller suspect exited the van with a clipboard, eyes scanning the tree line. Another man followed, shorter, broader, clearly armed, but they didn't make it far. Within seconds, they were on the ground, cuffed and silent. Hanley yanked the van doors open. Inside, two children no older than 9 curled in opposite corners, their wrists zip-tied, their faces pale with fear. Then Shadow leapt in. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He simply lay down between them. The girls sobbed. The boy reached for his fur, and for the first time in days, they felt safe. The news broke before sunrise. Grainy footage from the drone showed agents swarming the abandoned scout camp. The video was shaky, real, no polish, no edits, just truth. At the center of it all was a single image that stunned the nation. A German shepherd climbing from the back of a white van, 2 children clinging to his neck, and agents flooding in behind them. His name spread like fire through every TV station, every news app, every breakfast table. Shadow, the dog who remembered, the stray who saved, the hero who never gave up. But in Red Hollow, things moved quieter. The morning after the rescue, Deputy Ethan Cole sat on the front steps of the sheriff's station, sipping coffee from a dented thermos. His face was tired, but the lines had softened. Beside him, Captain Daniel Reeve watched as a familiar pickup truck pulled into the lot. It was Dr. Ava Morgan. She stepped out, her auburn braid tucked into a dark green parka, her arms cradling a tote filled with folded blankets and a small cooler. "I brought salmon," she said with a knowing smile. Before she reached the porch, the door of the truck creaked again, and out jumped Shadow. He trotted up the steps like he owned them, stopped next to Cole, and sat, military stillness, eyes forward. "He likes the real stuff," Ava teased. "Now you tell me," Cole said, rubbing behind the dog's ear. Reeve cleared his throat, adjusting his collar. "Dr. Ava Morgan," he said formally, "on behalf of Red Hollow and the state of Oregon, thank you for your role in the safe return of this dog and for helping identify multiple victims." Ava gave a modest nod. "I just fed a stray." "No," Reeve said, voice firm. "You fed a soldier." That weekend, the town came together. In the grassy lot behind the sheriff's department, folding chairs lined the lawn. Local firefighters set up a platform from repurposed lumber. Children clutched hot cocoa in gloved hands. Seniors wrapped in wool scarves sat with canes across their knees. There was no mayoral speech, no brass band. Just people, all of them waiting for a dog. At the center of the platform stood a small display case. Inside it a simple collar tag engraved with the canine seal and 5 words: Shadow, Red Hollow Sentinel. When Cole stepped forward dressed in full uniform for the first time since the rescue, his limp was visible, but so was his pride. The applause began slow, then spread like a wave. He knelt in front of Shadow. With steady hands, he attached the collar tag to the dog's vest. "Do you accept the call to serve again?" he asked softly. Shadow barked once. The crowd erupted in cheers. From the back row, Ava wiped her cheek and whispered, "That's my boy." In the weeks that followed, Shadow became more than a story. He became a presence. He walked every beat beside Cole. Children would run across the street just to wave. Locals left dog treats outside the sheriff's door. The high school art class painted his portrait on the gym wall, right next to the American flag. And when the nights grew long, when the snow returned, when others went home, Shadow stayed. On guard. Watching, still loyal, still working. But he wasn't the only one changed. With grant money and community support, Ava launched the Second Chance Project, a rescue and training program for stray dogs with working potential. Many came from shelters. Some from the streets, a few bore scars like Shadow. Every Saturday, Cole and Shadow joined the kids on the training field. The children called him the Sentinel, not just because of what he'd done, but because of what he still stood for. Sometimes, God doesn't send angels with wings. Sometimes he sends them with 4 paws, tired eyes, and a heart that refuses to quit. Shadow was once lost, forgotten, but he found his way back, not just to a mission, but to a purpose. And in doing so, he didn't just save others, he saved himself. The early morning sun filtered through the windows of the sheriff's operations room, casting long rectangles of light across stacks of paper and fading coffee rings. The celebration had passed, but the work hadn't. Captain Daniel Reeves stood at the whiteboard, staring at a cluster of names and red strings that refused to come together. Across the room, Lieutenant Grace Nolan clicked through a series of mugshots on a screen. Her face was tense, focused. "Delaney wasn't the end," she said, "just the edge of it." FBI agent Mike Hanley, arms crossed and jaw tight, nodded. "We found burner phones, anonymous wire transfers, storage units rented under fake names. And then there's the van, registered to a dead man 2 counties over." Reeve rubbed his temple. "How many?" Hanley's voice dropped. 5 confirmed missing children across 3 states. Same pattern, same profile. Grace turned to the room. "We're not chasing a madman anymore. We're chasing a market," Hanley finished. The room went quiet. Later that day, Dr. Ava Morgan stepped into the tech office, a file in her hands and urgency in her stride. "I need to show you something," she said. She laid down the folder in front of Grace and Liam Tran. "These are intake forms, notes, and vet logs from 4 years ago. I used to treat dogs brought in by local shelters. One stood out extreme trauma, flinched at male voices, but had signs of advanced training." Liam frowned. "Was it Shadow?" Ava shook her head. "No, it was another shepherd. Female, about 2 years younger, similar training scars. Same type of microchip, just scrambled." Grace's eyes narrowed. "Scrambled?" "They tried to wipe it," Ava explained, "but the coding was similar. Like it came from the same system as Shadow's." Hanley leaned forward. "You think there's more like him?" "I don't think," Ava said. "I know." That evening, Ethan Cole and Shadow sat in the rear lot of the sheriff's station, overlooking the hills beyond town. The wind carried the faint scent of pine and smoke from nearby chimneys. Cole tossed a rubber ball softly. Shadow didn't chase it. He just stared east toward the forest, toward something only he could feel. Cole followed his gaze. "What is it, boy?" Shadow let out a soft whine, then stood and started walking. No urgency, no fear, just certainty. Cole rose without a word and followed. By the time they reached the tree line, the sun had nearly disappeared. Shadow stopped at a narrow bend in the trail, where the snow had melted just enough to reveal old boot prints, small, staggered. Child-sized, Cole crouched, brushing snow aside. The prints led toward the North Ridge, away from town, toward a place marked on no tourist map. He radioed in. "This is Deputy Cole. I've got new prints." "Possibly from a child, and Shadow's on it." Grace's voice came back immediately. "You're not alone out there, are you?" Cole looked at the shepherd. "No, ma'am," he said. "Not even close." Back at the sheriff's office, Grace pulled up a satellite image of the North Ridge. "There's nothing up there," Liam said. "Exactly," Grace replied. "If they've got a fallback location, it won't be near a road. It'll be buried." "Something off-grid?" Hanley picked up the radio. "Keep going, Cole. We're right behind you." Cole and Shadow moved through the underbrush, following the scent trail only one of them could understand. The forest thickened, the light thinned, then Shadow stopped. A rusted grate lay beneath a fallen log, barely visible. Cole knelt beside it. A faint sound rose from below like humming or breathing. He looked at Shadow. The dog didn't bark, didn't move. He just waited. Back at the station, Hanley pulled a map from the archive. He circled a location, a Cold War-era shelter, never logged into county records. It was meant as a survival bunker, then sealed and forgotten. Grace looked up, but not by everyone. Inside the forest, Cole stood beside Shadow. "We found something," he said into the radio. There was a pause on the other end. Then Reeves' voice came through, low and steady. "Hold your position, Deputy. Team's en route." And Cole, "Yeah?" "Tell Shadow. We're not finished yet." Cole looked down. Shadow's tail gave a single quiet wag. Snow fell in hushed spirals as the tactical team moved through the trees. Their breaths fogged the air. Their boots left shallow impressions on the frozen forest floor. And at the front of the column, just beyond the beam of their flashlights, walked a single figure, low to the ground, silent but focused. Shadow. No commands. No leash. He led them because he knew where the trail ended. Knew who was still waiting to be found. Deputy Ethan Cole crouched beside the rusted bunker grate, his gloved fingers brushing snow from the metal latch. The humming sound from below was steady now, mechanical like ventilation. "Team's a minute out," he said into the radio. "Do not enter alone," Captain Reeve warned over comms. "Repeat, do not." But it was already too late. Shadow had begun to growl, low, controlled. And then he bolted into the shadows. Cole swore and followed, ducking into the narrow opening behind him. Inside, the bunker was colder than outside. Not just from the lack of heat, but from something deeper. The walls were concrete, the lights dim and yellow, and the hallway ahead buzzed with the hum of outdated wiring. Shadow led straight down the corridor. At the end, an old door, cracked open just an inch. From within, they heard it. A child's voice. A whisper. "Is someone there?" Cole pushed the door open slowly. Inside was a small chamber. 2 cots. A desk, and 2 children thin, frightened, eyes wide with confusion. The boy flinched back. But the girl gasped. "Doggy?" Shadow stepped forward, tail down, head low. He approached the children slowly, then lay at their feet. And the girl cried. The team arrived seconds later, clearing the building, sweeping corners, confirming no hostiles remained. Only ghosts. Boxes of documents, maps, lists, disposable phones, photographs with names written in red marker, years of planning, hidden beneath frost and pine. A trafficking ring, the remnants of something older, deeper, crueler than they'd imagined. But it was ending now, because of one lead. One bark, one dog. Back at the Red Hollow station that evening, the children sat in wool blankets, sipping cocoa. Their names were Maya and Jordan. They hadn't spoken much, but they wouldn't let go of Shadow. He lay beside them, tail thumping gently, eyes always watching the door. "Is he going to leave?" Maya asked. Cole knelt down. "Not unless you ask him to." She smiled and buried her face in Shadow's neck. In the days that followed, arrests were made across state lines. Frank Delaney cooperated, too broken to fight anymore. And the man in the white van, tracked, caught, and facing charges in 3 jurisdictions. The case would go on for months, maybe years. But it started with a missing deputy and ended with a dog who remembered what it meant to save. A month later, a ceremony was held in Portland. Federal agents, state troopers, K-9 units from around the country. At center stage, a single black and tan shepherd, ears high, vest polished. Shadow. The speaker read from a citation. "For bravery in the line of no duty assigned, and for restoring faith in what loyalty looks like, the Department of Justice hereby recognizes Shadow as a civilian recipient of the National Medal of Valor." The applause was thunderous, but Shadow only looked toward the crowd, toward the man in uniform who stood silently, waiting with a leash that was more symbolic than necessary. Ethan Cole. That night, back in Red Hollow, Cole sat on Ava's porch. A fire cracked in the barrel beside them. The sky above shimmered with stars. Shadow lay between them, belly full, finally asleep. Ava sipped her tea. "Do you think he'll stay?" Cole looked down at the sleeping dog. "He already has." They sat in silence, not the heavy silence of fear, but the good kind. The kind that settles between people who have survived something together. Ava glanced at Cole. "You ever wonder why he came back when he did?" Cole nodded slowly. "Every day," and then he smiled. Maybe he wasn't just looking for someone to save. Ava looked down. Maybe he was looking for someone to belong to. Because in the end, heroes don't always wear badges. Some just show up, with 4 paws, a scarred ear, and a mission that never left their heart. Shadow wasn't just a dog. He was the kind of soul you only meet once, and if you're lucky, you never lose him again. In a world that often forgets the quiet ones, Shadow, a once-lost dog who never gave up, reminds us of something timeless. Loyalty, courage, and love don't retire. They wait. Shadow wasn't given orders. He wasn't promised praise. He acted because something in his heart told him someone still needed him. And that was enough. For many of us, especially in our later years, it's easy to wonder if our time of purpose has passed. But the truth is, like Shadow, we carry within us memories, instincts, and wisdom that never disappear. They just wait for the moment they're needed again. Whether you're comforting a grandchild, offering a word of kindness to a neighbor, or simply showing up when no one else does, that quiet strength matters. You matter. Shadow didn't wear a badge. He didn't speak. But he changed lives not because he was loud, but because he was present. Let this story remind you, you're never too old, too broken, or too forgotten to be someone's miracle.